GoPro's latest small camera offering is the HERO5 Session. Now, it might look identical to the older Session, and in respect to its ergonomics, it is, but it now boasts 4K voice control, image stabilisation, a USB-C connection, as well as updated frame rates and resolutions. These features make the camera a more simplified version of the HERO5 Black, which is a camera that we've rated as 5 stars due to its exceptional picture quality. So on paper, the GoPro Hero5 Session is much closer in terms of spec to its big brother than the old generation Session was. There are a range of resolutions and frame rates available. At the top you have 4K at 30 frames per second, and at the bottom you have 120 frames per second at 720p. This isn't quite comparable to the 5 Black, which has 120 frames per second at 1080p, but it gives you quite a nice option. Ultimately, this is a very small camera. It weighs just 72 grams without the case, and for reference, the Hero5 Black without the case weighs in at 119 grams. The menu layout remains very similar to the older Session, a tiny little LCD screen. I would just recommend using the GoPro app. It's a very nice, simple layout, and it's much easier than squinting at a tiny little screen. GoPro say this camera is a one-button operation, and to an extent it is, but only after you have the camera set up. The one button is the record button, and that turns the camera on and starts recording at the same time. Aside from actually moving the camera to different mounting positions, there's very little need to actually touch the camera itself, and this is because it now has voice recognition. It works well enough. It's one of those things that if it works, it works. It's not going to be amazing, it's not going to be terrible, so it works. For a camera this size, it might not be surprising to hear that the image stabilisation isn't quite as refined as that of the 5 Black. While it's not bad, it can be quite noticeable in certain situations. The camera tended to overcompensate when the camera is mounted to a handlebar mount, and it produced wavy footage. Now, when compared to the camera mounted to a chest mount or a helmet mount, for example, I think the natural body movement definitely softens the image stabilisation, which makes it a much nicer picture to look at. The camera deals with exposure and contrast changes, I think, as well as the Hero5 Black, so there's really no complaints here. As you'd expect from such a small camera, the low light performance isn't quite as good as a full-size GoPro, but I have taken the camera through some fairly dark wooded areas and some very early morning road rides, and nothing really jumped out at me as being unacceptably noisy. In ProTune there is an option to limit the ISO, and it's really recommended to have a bit of an experiment with it, but it's very dependent on your riding situations. This camera comes with a non-removable 1000 mAh battery, and this is where I think the camera is really let down. The battery life has been a near consistent worry whenever I've been out riding with it, and I've had some very mixed results. So here are a few examples. On one of our BikeRadar staff rides at the Forest of Dean, the camera recorded 1 hour 58 seconds before the camera showed less than 10% battery life, and that's not too unreasonable for low single-digit temperatures. On the flip side, I did a full battery rundown test where I left the camera on my desk. The camera recorded a pretty staggering 1 hour, 50 minutes, 18 seconds of footage, and the 32 gig card actually ran out of space before the camera ran out of battery. But for clarity, this is in a very controlled environment. It's probably about 23-24 degrees Celsius, and the image stabilisation, while set to on, had almost zero work to actually do. Another experience I had with the camera was on a pre-work road ride where temperatures range from 0 Celsius down to pretty chilly -5 Celsius. The camera only recorded about 20 minutes of footage. I don't know whether the shutdown was a battery issue or just because of the temperatures. However, when the camera was back in the office and it had warmed back up to room temperature, there was a pretty surprising 70% battery life left. Either way, it does raise a bit of a concern for people that want to use this camera in cold environments. The Hero5 Session is a camera that costs £250, $300, so it does sit quite high in the market. I have to say though that for the size of the camera, the picture that it produces is really quite good, better than many other cameras out there. But I just didn't enjoy riding around constantly having the worry of, will the battery run out? Has the camera turned itself off? and even though there are recording lights, you can't really be constantly looking down at the camera because you want your eyes out front. There are people for whom this camera would be very suitable, but for me and the conditions that I rode through during the UK winter, it just didn't really play ball. Personally, I just prefer the option of being able to have replaceable batteries. 2 or 3 GoPro batteries just aren't bulky, so you can stick them in your jersey pocket and nearly forget about them until you need them. From my experiences over the past few months, it is a camera that can be quite susceptible to cold conditions, but there is certainly a place in the market for the session. Now, if you're the sort of rider that wants a lightweight, very portable package, isn't massively fussed about all-day recording, then this could be the camera to consider. For me personally, I would throw the session in my race day kit bag, but for general all-purpose riding, I'd much prefer to have the 5 Black purely because of the replaceable batteries.